America is standing at the edge of a workforce unraveling in real time. Factories are quieter, office floors are emptier, and the once unstoppable engine of upward mobility is grinding into something unrecognizable. In just months, over 1.1 million jobs have vanished. Hiring has collapsed to 2011 levels, and the industries that once guaranteed stability are now leading the charge in mass layoffs. The middle class feels it, the young feel it, and the bottom half of the country is already living in a recession no one will officially admit. This isn't a slowdown. It's the end of job security itself. The mass layoffs dominating the news are not a coincidence. They are the result of a single force reshaping the economy at a speed the labor market has never faced before. When 1.1 million jobs disappear in 10 months and 153,000 vanish in a single month, it signals something far more structural than a weak economy. It signals a workforce being replaced faster than it can recover, and AI is the engine driving that transformation. Artificial intelligence has erased the buffer that once existed between workers and automation. In previous recessions, companies cut jobs reluctantly. Today, they cut jobs strategically because replacing a $78,000 salary with a $40 per month automation tool isn't a risk, it's a guarantee. That's why more than 160,000 tech workers have been eliminated in 2025, and why over 575 companies have restructured around AI capability instead of human labor. This shift is hitting white-collar America hardest. Fields that once promised security, finance, design, customer support, HR, marketing, data analysis, are now being compressed into software dashboards. Tasks that used to require teams of employees can now be executed instantly by automated systems. That's the reason entry-level roles are evaporating. Not because companies don't need work done, but because AI performs that work with perfect efficiency. The collapse in new graduate hiring, now 50% below pre-pandemic levels, is the clearest evidence of this transition. Meanwhile, the trades are moving in the opposite direction. Electricians, welders, plumbers, HVAC technicians. These roles cannot be replaced by code or outsourced to a cloud server. As office jobs disappear, physical skill work is becoming one of the last truly defensible career paths in the modern economy. The labor market has split into two realities: those who understand AI and those who are being replaced by it. Adaptation is no longer a career advantage. It is the price of admission into a workforce where software moves faster than people, costs less than people, and never stops learning. The same forces accelerating AI adoption are crushing small businesses even faster. As corporations automate and streamline, independent employers, who make up 40% of all US jobs, are being pushed into a financial corner they cannot escape. The layoffs happening inside big companies are only one side of the crisis. The quieter, more destabilizing collapse is occurring on Main Street, where thousands of small firms are shutting down or reducing staff because the cost of staying open now exceeds the revenue they bring in. Small businesses operate on margins so thin they collapse under even minor economic pressure. Tariffs, higher import costs, expensive materials, insurance hikes, and rising utilities have erased what little profitability they once had. A business that used to survive on a 3 to 5% margin now faces double-digit increases in operating costs. They can't raise prices without losing customers, but they can't absorb the expenses without sinking deeper into the red. That impossible trade-off is why local companies across the country have eliminated tens of thousands of jobs in increments of 10, 20, or 50 workers at a time. Layoffs too small to make headlines, but large enough to hollow out entire communities. Worse, demand is weakening at the exact moment costs are exploding. Consumers are pulling back because they're afraid of losing their jobs, and businesses are pulling back because they can't afford payroll. A shrinking customer base combined with shrinking margins is an economic death trap, and it explains why so many storefronts now sit empty. Many small businesses have paused expansions, canceled hiring plans, or abandoned future growth entirely. Others are shutting down permanently because keeping the doors open has become financially irrational. While corporations can cut expenses by replacing workers with automation, Small businesses don't have that luxury. They don't have the capital, the scale, or the technological infrastructure. They can't offset costs through AI efficiency or global supply chains. They feel every dollar of pressure directly. The collapse of small business isn't just an economic statistic. It's the transfer of power from local employers to massive corporations, accelerating a workforce where fewer companies control more jobs, and workers have fewer options than ever before. As small businesses weaken, the balance of power is shifting aggressively toward corporations that can survive volatility by cutting deeper and faster than anyone else. While local employers struggle to keep 3 people on payroll, firms with 500-plus employees continue expanding their market share by doing what smaller companies simply cannot: eliminating thousands of positions overnight to protect profits. The layoff crisis is not evenly distributed across the economy. It is being engineered in a way that strengthens the largest players and quietly wipes out their competition. Corporate America has embraced a survival model based entirely on efficiency. Instead of absorbing higher costs, they offload them onto workers through automation, restructuring, and relentless cost-cutting. That's why the biggest layoffs, including cuts of 20,000 workers in a single announcement, come from companies that still generate billions in revenue. These cuts aren't signs of bankruptcy. They're strategies to widen margins and reassure shareholders. A corporation can remove an entire department to increase its quarterly earnings by just 1 to 2%, and Wall Street rewards them instantly. Meanwhile, Main Street cannot compete with that kind of flexibility. Local businesses can't replace staff with global software systems or negotiate bulk supply contracts. They don't have the capital to weather a year of declining demand while maintaining payroll. When corporations cut 8% of their workforce, they remain operational. When a small business cuts the same percentage, they often shut down entirely. This widening gap is reshaping the labor market. Large firms are still adding selective roles, often high-skill or automation-heavy positions, while simultaneously conducting the largest layoffs. That dual reality creates the illusion of strength even as millions lose their jobs. It's a system where job creation at the top is overshadowed by mass elimination underneath. As big companies consolidate more economic power, Main Street becomes weaker, workers become more replaceable, and entire communities become dependent on a shrinking number of corporate employers. The outcome is a labor market controlled by entities whose first obligation is not stability, but shareholder return. And in an economy built on efficiency above all else, the people who lose the most ground are the ones who depend on local businesses, local jobs, and local opportunity, the very foundation now being erased. The dominance of corporate America isn't just reshaping the job market, it's dragging half the country into a silent recession that economists refuse to acknowledge publicly. As major companies protect profits and small businesses collapse, the bottom 50% of households are living in an economy that, technically, hasn't crashed, but feels indistinguishable from a full-scale downturn. Income isn't keeping up with prices, savings are evaporating, and financial pressure is reaching levels not seen since the aftermath of 2008. Credit card balances have surged past $1.1 trillion, and interest rates exceeding 21% have turned everyday purchases into long-term debt traps. Millions of families now rely on credit just to cover rent, groceries, and utilities, not for luxuries, but for survival. Late payments are rising at the fastest pace in a decade, and delinquency rates on auto loans and credit cards show the same pattern. Working-class households simply cannot keep up with the cost of living. This financial strain is magnified by the job insecurity created at the top of the labor market. When workers see 160,000 tech employees lose high-paying jobs, when hiring slows to 2011-level lows, and when layoffs exceed 1.1 million in 10 months, they stop spending because they don't know if their next paycheck is guaranteed. That fear ripples downward. People reduce purchases, skip repairs, delay medical care, and stretch every dollar. This reduction in spending, multiplied across tens of millions of households, becomes the very recession they were afraid of. The bottom half of households doesn't have stock portfolios, investment properties, or large emergency funds. They rely on wages, and wages are weakening at the exact moment expenses reach historic highs. Rent is absorbing 30 to 40% of many incomes. Car payments now average nearly $750 per month. Even basic necessities like childcare and groceries have risen double digits in just 2 years. There is no flexibility left. While corporate America rewards itself with cost savings and stock buybacks, ordinary workers are absorbing the economic damage. Recession for the bottom 50% isn't a forecast, it's the current reality. And as job losses accelerate and household debt climbs, the gap between official economic data and lived experience is becoming impossible to ignore. The financial strain crushing the bottom half of households isn't happening in isolation. It's being fueled by the most aggressive wave of job cuts the country has seen since the pandemic. What's unfolding in 2025 isn't a normal employment downturn. It is a coordinated contraction across nearly every sector of the economy, and the numbers show just how severe the damage has become. From January to October alone, companies eliminated 1.1 million jobs, a staggering 65% increase from the previous year. October by itself wiped out 153,000 positions, the kind of monthly loss typically associated with full-blown recessions. These cuts aren't confined to failing companies or struggling industries. Even profitable corporations are reducing headcount because protecting margins now takes precedence over preserving jobs. Employers have slashed 44% more positions this year than in all of 2024, turning 2025 into the worst year for layoffs since 2020. The contrast is alarming. Earnings reports remain positive while the workforce is being dismantled underneath. A key reason for this escalation is the collapse in hiring demand. Planned hiring has fallen 35% year over year, hitting the lowest level since 2011. Employers are signaling that they don't need more workers. They need fewer. Job openings are shrinking, applicant pools are swelling, and entire categories of work are disappearing faster than they can be replaced. With only 40,000 new hires expected monthly across the nation, the math becomes impossible for millions seeking employment. This environment creates a dangerous cycle. Job insecurity weakens consumer spending. Weakened spending pressures companies to cut deeper. Each round of cuts generates more fear, more hesitation, more financial instability. The economy begins to cannibalize itself from the inside. That's why analysts warn that the labor market is no longer softening, it is unraveling. The layoff wave isn't slowing, it's accelerating. In 2025, employment isn't weakening quietly. It is collapsing out in the open. Millions can feel it happening in real time. The hiring freeze, the sudden restructurings, the unsettling silence after submitting hundreds of applications. This is no longer a labor slowdown. It is a bloodbath, and it has already rewritten the trajectory of the entire workforce. The layoff wave of 2025 is not ending. It's evolving into something far more permanent and far more dangerous. A labor market where job cuts never stop. Analysts are warning that 2026 will not be defined by one major collapse, but by constant rolling eliminations that turn job insecurity into a permanent part of American life. Instead of one-time restructuring events, companies are preparing to trim staff in smaller, more frequent waves, month after month, quarter after quarter. This emerging pattern is why economists call it the forever layoff era. More than 51% of job cuts in 2025 came from layoffs involving fewer than 50 workers. These small reductions barely make the news, but they accumulate with devastating force. They allow corporations to shrink quietly, avoid public backlash, and steadily lower labor costs without announcing massive headline-driving cuts. The long-term effect is severe. Workers never feel safe, companies never fully stop downsizing, and hiring plans remain frozen. The labor market becomes a place where stability simply doesn't exist. This shift is being driven by the same pressures that fueled the 2025 bloodbath: collapsing demand, rising operating costs, and the rapid adoption of automation. When companies believe the safest path forward is constant adjustment, workers become variables to be reduced whenever financial targets slip. The old model of cutting once and rebuilding later is gone. The new model is perpetual contraction. What makes the coming era even more dangerous is the gap between job losses and job creation. Businesses are eliminating hundreds of thousands of roles while planning to hire only 40,000 new workers per month. The weakest hiring pipeline in 14 years. That imbalance guarantees that every new round of cuts pushes more people into long-term unemployment. In this environment, job seekers face the bleakest conditions in over a decade. Competition intensifies, wages stagnate, and workers who lose positions may spend months searching with no progress. The forever layoff era is not about one catastrophic collapse. It's about a workforce that remains permanently exposed, permanently vulnerable, and permanently unsure if next week's job will still be theirs. The rise of the forever layoff era is hitting every sector, but nowhere has the impact been more disruptive or more symbolic than in the tech industry. For years, tech was treated as the safest corner of the economy. High pay, endless hiring, lavish perks, and an almost guaranteed career path. That illusion is now gone. The very industry that powered America's economic expansion is dismantling its own workforce at a scale no one thought possible. The data tells the story. More than 575 tech companies have announced layoffs in 2025, eliminating over 160,000 jobs. That means roughly 540 tech workers lose their job every single day. A collapse comparable only to the dot-com implosion, but happening twice as fast. This collapse isn't driven by bankruptcy or a lack of innovation. It's driven by efficiency. Tech firms discovered that AI can perform enormous quantities of work that once required entire teams of engineers, analysts, designers, and support staff. The same companies that built automation are now using it to downsize their own people. And because tech firms operate on global scale, every productivity gain becomes another reason to reduce staff. It's the purest expression of the new economic logic. Maximize output, minimize payroll. The consequences extend far beyond Silicon Valley. High-paying tech jobs once supported entire local economies: Seattle, Austin, the Bay Area, Northern Virginia. Now those regions are feeling the shock as mid-career workers are suddenly unemployed, competing against recent graduates, international applicants, and AI tools that replicate their skill sets instantly. The hiring slowdown is brutal. Job postings for technical roles have fallen sharply, and many companies have frozen recruitment entirely. The pipeline that once promised opportunity has become a bottleneck where thousands of qualified applicants compete for a handful of openings. Even the graduates who tailored their lives around entering tech are facing a reality they were never prepared for. Hiring for new grads has dropped 50% from pre-pandemic levels, and the salary expectations that once defined the industry have collapsed. The average starting salary is now $68,400, far below the six-figure positions students were told to expect. The dream of a stable, high-income tech career has evaporated, replaced by an industry that is cutting faster than it is hiring and automating faster than it is training. The end of the tech golden age marks a major turning point in the American economy. When the most future-oriented sector begins shrinking this aggressively, it signals a deeper transformation. An economy that no longer needs as many workers, no longer pays them as it once did, and no longer guarantees upward mobility. What's happening in tech isn't an isolated collapse. It's a preview of what comes next for every white-collar industry in the country. The collapse of the tech sector didn't just eliminate experienced workers, it detonated the entire foundation young people were told to build their futures on. For more than a decade, college was sold as the guaranteed path to stability, mobility, and a six-figure salary. But as hiring freezes spread and automation replaces entry-level roles, graduates are stepping into a labor market that simply has no space for them. The result is a generation facing the most hostile job landscape in modern history. The numbers reveal how severe the damage is. Hiring for new graduates has plunged 50% compared to pre-pandemic levels, creating a bottleneck where millions of educated young adults are competing for a fraction of the opportunities that existed just a few years ago. Even when graduates do receive job offers, they come with far lower pay than expected. Surveys show students anticipate earning around $101,500, but the actual average starting salary is just $68,400, a staggering 35% gap between expectation and reality. This mismatch creates a financial crisis before adulthood even begins. Many students leave school with 5 or 6 figures of student debt, only to be handed salaries that can't even service the minimum payments without sacrificing basic necessities. Rent alone often consumes 30 to 40% of their income, leaving little room for savings, emergencies, or financial independence. More than 42% of new graduates have already admitted they've been forced to scale back their lifestyle plans because the economic reality is radically worse than they were prepared for. What makes this crisis more devastating is the lack of experience that employers now demand. Graduates are trapped in a paradox. Entry-level jobs require experience they cannot get because the entry-level jobs no longer exist. As a result, 1 in 5 new graduates has been searching for a job for over 10 months with no progress. Thousands are exhausting savings, delaying career plans, moving back home, or taking roles far outside their field just to avoid total financial collapse. Meanwhile, fear of AI is shaping an entire generation's outlook. Surveys show 90% of young job seekers fear losing flexibility, remote work options, or even future roles entirely because automation threatens to absorb the tasks they were trained to do. The confidence that once defined new graduates is gone, replaced by hesitation, uncertainty, and a growing belief that the economic ladder they were promised has been pulled away. The recent graduate crisis isn't temporary. It is the result of structural changes in wages, hiring, automation, and corporate behavior. And it signals a deeper truth. The first generation raised for the digital economy is now facing the sharpest economic decline at the exact moment they were supposed to rise. The story of the modern American workforce is no longer one of stability, mobility, or predictable opportunity. It is a story defined by uncertainty, relentless restructuring, and the quiet erosion of the foundations people once relied on. The data paints a picture that cannot be softened. More than 1 million layoffs in 10 months, hiring frozen at levels not seen since 2011, and industries once considered untouchable dismantling their workforce piece by piece. Workers across the country are living inside this shift every day. In corporate offices, in small towns, in major tech hubs, and in the homes of recent graduates who expected a future that never arrived. The bottom half of households is already experiencing the economic pressure usually associated with recessions, while the top of the labor market is rapidly being reshaped by automation and efficiency models that prioritize cost over people. This is the environment where millions now build their lives. An economy transforming faster than workers can adapt. A job market defined by rolling layoffs, shrinking opportunities, and widening gaps between expectation and reality. It is a moment that captures the end of one era and the uncomfortable beginning of another, leaving the country to grapple with a workforce that no longer resembles the one it once promised.